The siren started screaming at 3 in the morning. Park woke up in her small room on station, her heart beating fast. She had heard emergency drills before. This was not a drill. This sound was different. This sound was real. She jumped out of bed and ran to the window. What she saw made her blood turn cold. The sky was full of ships, dozens of them. They were dark and shaped like blades cutting through the stars. She knew those ships. Everyone in the galaxy knew those ships. They belonged to They were a warrior race. They were tall, nearly 8 feet, with skin and eyes that glowed like hot copper. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They believed that fear was the greatest weapon. They believed that the strong should rule and the weak should serve. And now they were here. The first explosion shook the station, fell against the wall. Alarms screamed louder. Red lights flashed everywhere. She could hear people running in the hallway outside. She could hear screaming. She had to move. She had to get to the escape pods. That was what the training said. But as she opened her door, she stopped. The nursery wing was on this level. The research station had several alien families living here, scientists from different worlds working together. Some of them had children. She studied alien life. She had spent 3 years on this station learning about different species, their bodies, their cultures, their ways. She had made friends here, real friends, and some of those friends had Bobbies in that nursery. She ran not toward the escape pods, toward the nursery. The hallway was full of smoke. People pushed past her, running the other way. Someone grabbed her arm and shouted at her to turn around. She pulled free and kept running. The floor shook again. The lights went out, then came back on, dim and flickering. When she reached the nursery wing, she found the door broken open. Inside, everything was chaos. Cribs were knocked over. Medical equipment was scattered on the floor. She searched through the room, calling out, hoping someone would answer. Then she heard it, a small sound, a tiny cry. She followed the sound to a back room. The door was half closed. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dark except for the emergency lights, and there, on the floor, she found them. A woman lay still on the ground. She was not moving. Her skin was pale and her copper eyes were open but empty. Knew death when she saw it. This woman was gone. But next to her, wrapped in a torn blanket, was a baby, a cub. It was tiny, no bigger than a human infant. Its skin was soft and its little eyes were squeezed shut as it cried. Its small claws grabbed at the air, searching for something to hold. Knelt down. She looked at the dead mother. She looked at the crying baby. She understood what had happened here. This woman had been one of the researchers, a defector who had left her people to work with humans. She had believed in peace. She had believed in cooperation. And now she was dead and her baby was alone. The station shook again, closer this time. Could hear boots in the hallway, heavy boots. Soldiers were coming. She did not think. She did not plan. She just acted. She picked up the baby and held it close to her chest. The cub was warm and small and trembling. It stopped crying the moment it felt her heartbeat. Wrapped her coat around the baby and ran. She knew the station well. She had explored every corner during her 3 years here. She knew about the maintenance tunnels below the main level. She knew places where a person could hide. She found an access hatch and climbed down into the darkness. The tunnels were narrow and cold. Pipes ran along the walls. The air smelled like oil and metal, but it was safe, for now. She crawled through the tunnels until she found a small storage room. It was barely big enough for one person. She squeezed inside and closed the hatch behind her. Then she sat in the darkness, holding the baby, trying to breathe quietly. Above her she could hear the soldiers. Their boots were loud on the metal floors. Their voices were sharp and angry. They were searching for survivors. They were searching for her. The baby made a small sound, pressed it closer to her chest. She started to hum. It was a song her grandmother used to sing to her when she was small, a Korean lullaby about the moon and the stars and a child who was loved. She did not know if Bobbies understood music, but this baby grew quiet. Its small claws grabbed her shirt and it pressed its face against her heart. For 3 days, hid in those tunnels, she had a water bottle in her coat pocket and a few protein bars she had grabbed on the way. She shared everything with the baby. She chewed the food into small pieces and fed it carefully. She gave it water drop by drop. She held it when it cried and sang to it when it was scared. She named the baby. It was a Korean word that meant spring. It meant new beginning. It meant hope. On the second day, she heard the soldiers getting closer. They were checking the tunnels now. She moved deeper into the maintenance system, crawling through spaces so tight she could barely fit. The baby stayed quiet, as if it understood they were in danger. On the third day, she found a small vent that looked out into the main corridor. She watched as soldiers walked past. They were huge and terrifying, with armor and weapons and those burning copper eyes. She held her breath and did not move. By the fourth day, her food was gone. Her water was almost empty. The baby was getting weaker. It needed proper food, proper care. She knew she could not hide forever. She knew she would have to make a choice. That choice was made for her when the hatch above her head was ripped open. Light flooded in, blinding her. She looked up and saw 3 soldiers staring down at her, their weapons pointed at her face. But she did not let go of the baby. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking from days of hiding. The soldiers looked at her, then at the cub in her arms. Their expressions changed. Confusion, anger, something else she could not read. One of them spoke into a communicator. Then they grabbed her arms and pulled her up out of the tunnel. The light was too bright. Everything was spinning, but she kept her arms wrapped around. The soldiers took to a shuttle. She was pushed inside and strapped to a seat. The baby was still in her arms. The soldiers had tried to take it from her, but she had fought. She had kicked and screamed and bitten one of them on the hand. They were so surprised that a small human would fight back that they let her keep the cub. For now. The shuttle flew up from the station and into the darkness of space. Through the small window could see the fleet. There were so many ships. Some were small fighters. Some were massive warships bigger than cities. And in the center of them all was the flagship. It was the largest ship she had ever seen. It was black and covered in strange symbols that glowed with pale blue light. The shuttle docked with the flagship. The soldiers pulled to her feet and marched her through long corridors. Everything was cold and dark. The walls were made of black metal. The air smelled like smoke and something else, something that made her skin crawl. They brought her to a huge room. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it. Blue flames burned in metal bowls along the walls, casting dancing shadows everywhere. And at the far end of the room, on a throne made of bones and metal, sat the warlord. Had heard stories about warlord, everyone had. He was the supreme commander of the Third Fleet. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had killed more enemies than anyone could count. He was feared across the galaxy. He was also the biggest she had ever seen. He sat on his throne like a mountain sits on the earth. His skin was covered with scars, ritual marks that showed his victories. His eyes burned like hot copper coins. He wore armor made of dark metal, and a long red cape hung from his shoulders. The room was full of other warriors and officers and advisors. They stood along the walls, watching, waiting, felt their eyes on her like the weight of stones. The soldiers pushed her forward until she stood at the base of the throne. They forced her to her knees, but she kept her head up. She kept her arms around the baby. Looked down at her. His expression did not change. It was like looking at a statue made of stone and fire. "What is this?" His voice was deep and loud. It echoed through the room like thunder. One of the soldiers stepped forward and spoke. "We found her hiding in the maintenance tunnels, my lord. She had the cub with her." Leaned forward. His burning eyes moved from to the baby in her arms. Something changed in his face. It might have been surprise, it might have been anger. It was hard to tell. "A human," he said slowly. "A human holding a child of blood." He stood up from his throne. He was even bigger when he was standing. He walked down the steps toward her. each footstep heavy on the metal floor. He stopped right in front of her and looked down. "Do you know what we do to enemies who touch our young?" he asked. His heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break out of her chest. Her legs were shaking. Every part of her body wanted to run, to hide, to get away from this monster standing over her. But she did not run. She could not run. She had a baby in her arms. A baby who was sleeping now, calm against her heartbeat. A baby who trusted her. She looked up at the warlord. "Someone had to protect her," she said. Her voice was small but steady. "Your soldiers could not." The room went silent, so silent that could hear her own breathing. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the whole world had stopped. Then made a sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a growl. Could not tell. A female stepped forward from the crowd. She was tall and covered in scars, with two curved blades at her belt. Her face was twisted with anger. "My lord," she said, "let me take her tongue. She has no right to speak to you this way. She is nothing. She is prey." Raised one hand. The female stopped. Everyone stopped. The warlord was still looking at. His copper eyes studied her like she was something he had never seen before, like she was a puzzle he could not solve. "The cub," he said, "its mother was a traitor. She turned her back on her people to work with humans. When our soldiers found her, she fought back. She died a traitor's death." He paused. "Why did you take her child?" Thought about lying. She thought about making up a clever reason, something about politics or hostages or survival. But she was too tired for lies. She was too scared. So she told the truth. Because she was alone, said, because she was afraid, because she needed someone. She looked down at the sleeping baby, then back up at the warlord. Because that is what humans do. Stared at her for a long moment. The blue flames flickered. The shadows danced. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. "Humans," the warlord said finally. "Small, weak, no claws, no armor, no fire in your blood." He tilted his head. "And yet here you stand, holding a child of your enemies, speaking to me like you have the right." He turned and walked back to his throne. He sat down slowly, his cape spreading out behind him like a pool of blood. "I should kill you," he said. "That is what my people expect. That is what tradition demands." He leaned back in his throne. "But I am curious. I want to know if your courage is real or if it is just the foolishness of the weak." The female warrior stepped forward again. "My lord, please, let me end this. She is an insult to us all." Smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who has found something interesting to play with. "No," he said, "I have a better idea." He looked at. His copper eyes were bright with something that might have been amusement or might have been cruelty. "There is an old tradition among my people," he said. "The trial of fangs. It is a test, 3 challenges. If you survive, you earn the right to speak in my court. If you fail, you die." He paused. No outsider has ever been offered this chance. Felt cold all over. She knew what he was doing. He was giving her hope just so he could take it away. He was playing with her like a cat plays with a mouse. But what choice did she have? "And the baby," she asked, "what happens to?" Raised an eyebrow. "You named it." Her said, "I named her, it means spring." For just a moment, something flickered in the warlord's eyes. Then it was gone. "If you survive the trials," he said, "you may keep the cub. If you fail, she will be raised as, she will never know that a human tried to save her." Closed her eyes, she thought about her chances. She was small and weak. She had no weapons, no training, no strength. She would probably die. But probably was not certainly, and as long as there was a chance, she would fight. She opened her eyes and looked at the warlord. They gave her one night to rest before the trials began. They put her in a small cell with a hard bed and a bowl of water, but they let her keep. Perhaps they thought it was funny. Perhaps they wanted to see if she would still be brave with the cub to protect. Did not sleep that night. She sat on the bed within her arms and thought about everything that had happened. She thought about her family back on Earth, her mother and father in, her brother in soul. Did they know the station had been attacked? Did they think she was dead? She thought about the mother lying still on the nursery floor. She thought about the promise she had made without words. She would protect this child, no matter what. When morning came, the soldiers took her to a large chamber deep inside the ship. It was round and empty, with metal walls and a high ceiling. Hundreds of sat in seats around the edges, looking down like spectators at a game. Sat in a special box above them all, watching with those burning copper eyes. A priest walked to the center of the chamber. He was old, with faded skin and symbols tattooed on his face. He raised his arms and spoke in a loud voice. The trial of Fangs has 3 parts: endurance, pain, fear. These are the tests of a true warrior. These are the tests that prove the strength of the soul. He looked at. Do you accept these trials, human? Nodded. Her mouth was too dry to speak. The first trial was endurance. They put in a small room with no windows, the door locked behind her. At first, nothing happened. Then she felt the cold. It started slowly. The temperature dropped little by little. Her breath began to make clouds in the air. Frost formed on the walls. Her fingers grew numb. Her lips turned blue. She held close to her body. She wrapped her coat around them both. She pressed the cub against her chest, under her shirt, against her skin. The baby's body was warm, but not warm enough. She could feel the cold trying to steal that warmth away. The hours passed. The cold got worse. Ice formed on her eyebrows. Her legs stopped working right. She fell to her knees, then curled up on the floor with underneath her body. She made herself into a shield between the cold and the baby. She thought she would die. She was sure she would die. But she kept thinking about, if she died, the baby would freeze too. She could not let that happen. She would not let that happen. So she stayed alive. By pure will, by pure stubbornness, by pure love, she stayed alive. When the door finally opened, they found her frozen to the floor. But she was breathing, and was warm against her chest, sleeping peacefully as if nothing had happened. The crowd made sounds of surprise. Some of them laughed, some of them did not. The second trial was pain. They brought her to another room where a sat waiting. He was thin and pale, with cold eyes and sharp instruments on the table beside him. He was an interrogator. His job was to make people hurt. They tied to a chair. They took away from her but kept the cub where she could see. The interrogator picked up a small blade. The mark of a petitioner, he said. All who seek to speak in the warlord's court must carry this mark. It shows that you have paid for your voice with blood. He pressed the blade against her forearm. Then he began to cut. The pain was worse than anything had ever felt. It burned like fire and ice at the same time. It went deep into her bones. She screamed. She could not help it. The sound tore out of her throat before she could stop it. But she did not beg. She did not cry. She did not ask him to stop. She looked at the interrogator while he worked. She stared into his cold eyes and did not look away. He cut the symbol into her skin, a pattern of lines and curves that meant something in the language. Blood ran down her arm and dripped onto the floor. When he finished, he put down the blade. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked away first. They gave back to her. She held the baby with her good arm while her other arm bled, but she was still standing. She was still fighting. The third trial was fear. This was the trial that killed most people. They had creatures they used in war, beasts bred for hunting and killing. One of these beasts was waiting in the arena. It was called a ravager. It was as big as a horse, with 6 legs and a mouth full of teeth as long as knives. Its skin was black and covered with scales. Its eyes were red and empty of everything except hunger. They put in the arena with the beast. The crowd went silent. Everyone was waiting to see her die. The ravager circled her slowly. Its claws clicked on the metal floor. A low growl came from its throat, a sound that made her whole body want to run. But she could not run. She had pressed against her chest. If she ran, the beast would chase. If she ran, she would die tired instead of standing. So she stood still. She stood in the center of the arena and watched the beast circle her. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a drum in her chest. The Ravager came closer. It was so close she could smell its breath. It was so close she could see the hunger in its red eyes. And then did something no one expected. She started to sing. It was the same lullaby she had sung to in the tunnels. The same song her grandmother had sung to her when she was small. It was soft and gentle, a song about the moon and the stars and love that never ends. The Ravager stopped. Its ears went up. It tilted its head like a confused dog. Kept singing. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. She sang to the beast like she sang too. She sang like she was singing to everything in the universe that was scared and alone and needed comfort. The Ravager sniffed the air. It smelled the baby against her chest. It smelled her fear and her love and something else, something it had never smelled before. Then it lay down at her feet. The crowd exploded with noise. Some people were shouting in anger. Some were shouting in amazement, but did not hear them. She was looking at the beast lying before her, and she was crying. She had passed the trials. She had survived. Stood up in his box. The noise slowly died down. Everyone looked at him, waiting. "The human has completed the trial of fangs," he said. His voice was strange. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. "She has earned the right to speak in my court." Stood up nearby. Her face was twisted with rage. "This is wrong. She is an outsider. She used tricks, not strength." Looked at her. She used what she had. That is what warriors do. He looked back at, "That is what we all do." Word spread through the fleet like fire through dry grass. The human woman had survived the trial of fangs. She had walked through ice and carried a cub against her heart to keep it warm. She had let them cut her arm and never begged for mercy. She had tamed a Ravager with nothing but her voice. Some said it was impossible. They said the trials must have been fake, made easy to entertain the warlord. Others said she had used some human trick, some technology hidden in her clothes. But many who had watched saw the truth. They saw a small, soft creature stand against everything that should have destroyed her, and they did not know what to think. Was given better quarters after the trials. She had a real bed now and warm food and medicine for her wounded arm. The scar was still fresh and red, the symbol burned into her skin forever. She did not know what it meant. She was not sure she wanted to know. Was growing. Cubs grew fast, faster than human bobbies. The little one could hold up her head now and make small sounds that were almost words. She still slept best when pressed against heart, but she was getting stronger every day. 3 weeks after the trials, a soldier came to his door. The warlord wanted to see her, not in the throne room this time, in his war room. She followed the soldier through long corridors until they reached a large chamber filled with lights and machines. Holographic maps floated in the air, showing stars and planets and the movements of fleets. Generals and officers stood around the central table, pointing and talking in low voices. Was there, standing at the head of the table. He saw enter and gestured for her to come closer. The officers moved aside, making room for her. Some of them looked at her with curiosity, some with anger. One of them was, and her eyes were full of hate. Walked to the table and looked at the holographic map. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. Then her blood went cold. It was Earth, her planet, her home. The map showed the continents she knew so well, the oceans she had dreamed about during her years in space. Little dots moved around the planet, showing satellites and stations, and moving toward it like a wave of darkness was the fleet. "We are planning our next campaign," said. His voice was calm, like he was talking about the weather. "Your world has resources we need, metals, water, land." He looked at her. "People." Felt like she could not breathe. All those months of trials and survival, and she had almost forgotten why she was really here. They were not just conquerors. They were slavers. They took entire populations and put them to work in their mines, their factories, their ships. And they were coming for Earth. Your people will fall, continued. You have weapons, yes, ships, soldiers, but you have never faced anything like us. You will fight for a few months, maybe a year, then you will kneel. He smiled that cold predator smile. All species kneel in the end. Stared at the map. She thought about her parents in their small apartment inn. She thought about her brother teaching his students in Seoul. She thought about all the billions of people going about their lives, not knowing that death was coming from the stars. Something changed inside her. The fear was still there, but something else was growing now. Something hot and bright and angry. She had been scared for so long. She had been running and hiding and surviving, but she was tired of being scared. She looked up at the warlord. He was watching her, waiting to see what she would do. You think we are weak, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. You look at us and you see small bodies, soft skin, no claws, no fangs, no armor. Nodded slowly. This is what I see. This is what is true. You see what we show you, said. You see what we let you see. She took a step closer to him. The generals around the table shifted nervously. His hand moved toward her blade, but did not stop. We are soft because we choose to be soft, she said. We are gentle because we can afford to be gentle. We smile at strangers and help people we do not know because that is who we want to be. She looked around at the officers, meeting their copper eyes one by one. But do not make the mistake of thinking that is all we are. She reached up and touched the scar on her arm, the symbol they had cut into her skin, the mark of a petitioner. You gave me this trial, she said. You wanted to see if I was strong enough to suffer, strong enough to endure, strong enough to face my fear. She let her hand drop. But I did not do those things because I am strong. I did them because I love. She lifted slightly. The cub was awake now, her little copper eyes looking around curiously. I walked through ice because I loved this child more than I loved being warm. I let you cut me because I loved her more than I feared pain. I faced your beast because I loved her more than I loved my own life. Her voice grew harder. And that is what you do not understand about humans. His eyes narrowed. Explain. You saw what I did for one child, said. One child who was not even mine. One child of a species that destroyed my station and killed my friends. She took another step toward him. She was so close now she could feel the heat coming off his body. Now imagine what 8 billion of us would do for our home. The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. You think you will conquer Earth in a year, continued. You are wrong. You will fight for every city, every town, every village. You will fight for every house and every room in every house. Because humans do not kneel. We break. We die. But we do not kneel. She looked into the warlord's burning eyes. She saw something there she had not seen before. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. Something like doubt. We are soft because we choose to be, she said again. But when something threatens what we love, we become something else. Something you have never seen. Something you are not ready for. Stared at her for a long moment. The blue flames flickered. The holographic map turned slowly between them, Earth hanging in the darkness like a small blue jewel. Is that a threat, little human? He asked. Did not look away. It is a promise. For a moment nothing happened, then began to laugh. It was a strange sound, deep and rough. It filled the war room and echoed off the walls. A promise, he said. He was still laughing. A promise from a woman who cannot even lift a blade. He shook his head. You are either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both, said. Stopped laughing. He looked at her with those copper eyes and something changed in his face. Something she could not read. Maybe, he said quietly, maybe both. He turned back to the map, but saw that he was looking at Earth differently now, like it was not just a target anymore, like it was a question he did not know how to answer. Came for her the next day. Was in her room, feeding small pieces of soft food. The cub was learning to eat on her own now, her tiny claws grabbing at the food with clumsy eagerness. It was a peaceful moment, the kind had learned to treasure. Then the door slammed open. Stood there, tall and terrifying, her twin blades gleaming at her belt. Her copper eyes were burning with rage. "You have shamed me," said. Her voice was low and dangerous. "You have shamed my people. A soft, weak human standing in our war room speaking to our warlord like an equal." She stepped inside. "I will not allow this to continue." Stood up slowly, holding close. "I did not ask for any of this. I just wanted to protect this child." "The child is not yours," spat. "She is. She belongs with her people, not with some human animal." She drew one of her blades. "I challenge you to single combat. By our law, you cannot refuse without losing your life and the cub." Felt her stomach drop. Single combat, against a trained warrior, against someone who had spent her whole life learning to kill. This was not like the trials. This was not endurance or pain or fear. This was murder dressed up in tradition. "If I refuse," she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then you forfeit," said. "You will be executed, the cub will be taken from you, and your precious earth will burn just the same." There was no choice. There had never been any choice. "When?" asked. Smiled, it was cruel and sharp. "Tomorrow at dawn." She turned and walked out. The door slammed shut behind her. Sank onto the bed. Her hands were shaking, made a small sound and pressed against her chest, sensing her fear. She held the cub close and tried to think. She had no training. She had never held a weapon in her life. She had survived the trials through luck and love and stubbornness, but those things would not help her in a fight against. The warrior would cut her down in seconds. That night she did not sleep. She sat by the window of her room and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was her family. She might never see them again. She looked down at sleeping in her arms. The little cub's face was peaceful, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. She had no idea what was happening. She did not know that tomorrow might be the last day. "I am sorry," whispered. I tried so hard." Dawn came too fast. The soldiers took her to the arena where she had faced the Ravager. But now the arena was different. The beast was gone. In its place was a circle marked on the floor, surrounded by thousands of waiting to watch. Was already there, standing in the center of the circle. She wore light armor and held both her curved blades. She looked like death waiting to happen. Walked into the arena. She had made a sling out of cloth and tied to her chest. The cub was awake but quiet, her copper eyes watching everything, would not leave her behind. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The crowd went quiet as she entered the circle. She could feel their eyes on her. Some were curious. Some were hungry for blood. But here and there she saw something else. She saw looking at her with something like respect. Was watching from his box above the arena. His face showed nothing. "Begin," he said. Moved like lightning. Her first strike came so fast that barely saw it. The blade cut across her shoulder, opening a deep wound. Blood ran down her arm. The pain was bright and sharp. She stumbled back, did not give her time to recover. The second strike came for her chest, twisted away, but the blade caught her side. More blood, more pain. The crowd cheered. They loved this. They loved watching the weak fall before the strong. Fell to her knees. Her vision was getting dark around the edges. She could hear her own heartbeat, fast and desperate. She could feel pressed against her chest, warm and alive. She thought about giving up. It would be easy. Just lie down and let it end. The pain would stop. The fear would stop. Everything would stop. But then she thought about waking up alone. She thought about the cub crying for someone who would never come. She thought about all the promises she had made, spoken and unspoken. No. She would not give up. She would not lie down. She would not surrender. Stood up. The crowd went quiet, even hesitated, surprised to see her rise. Blood was running down both of her arms now. Her body was shaking with pain and exhaustion, but she was standing. She was still standing. Attacked again. Another strike aimed at her head this time. Did not try to dodge, she could not. She was too slow, too weak, too hurt. Instead, she reached up and caught the blade with her bare hand. The edge cut deep into her palm. Blood poured between her fingers. The pain was beyond anything she had felt before, but she did not let go. She held the blade tight and stepped forward, pressing into the weapon instead of away. His eyes went wide. She tried to pull back but moved with her, closing the distance until they were face to face. "You want me to fall?" His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent arena. "Then you will have to kill me standing." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The blood dripped onto the floor. The crowd held its breath. Then a voice rang out from somewhere in the crowd. A single word in the language. Did not know what it meant, but she heard others take up the cry. One voice became 10. 10 became 100. The word echoed through the arena like thunder. Looked around, confused. The crowd was chanting now. Even some of the warriors near the front had joined in. Stood up in his box. He raised one hand and the chanting stopped. Then he began to walk down from his seat, step by step, until he reached the arena floor. He walked into the circle and stopped between and he looked at his lieutenant, then at the bleeding human who refused to fall. "Enough," he said. Stepped back, lowering her blade. Her face was twisted with confusion and anger. "My lord, the combat is not finished." "Yes, it is," said. He turned to face the crowd. "This human has shown us something we have forgotten. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is not the strength of the body or the sharpness of the blade." He looked back at, "It is love. It is love standing taller than death." He turned to address his people. "The war with Earth is ended. We will send ships, but not for conquest, for treaty, for peace." His copper eyes found, "And this human will speak for her kind." The crowd exploded into noise. Some cheered. Some shouted in anger, but did not seem to care. He looked at with something new in his eyes. It might have been admiration, it might have been friendship. It was hard to tell. Finally let go of the blade. Her hand was ruined, cut to the bone. But she did not feel the pain. She felt something else. Something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. 3 months later, she stood on the observation deck of a diplomatic ship. Below her, through the wide windows, Earth turned slowly in the darkness. The oceans were blue and beautiful. The clouds were white and soft. It was the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. Stood beside her on unsteady legs, pressing her small face against the glass. The cub made excited sounds, pointing at the world below with tiny claws. Somewhere down there, his brother was waiting at the landing site. Her parents were there too, old and worried but alive. They did not know yet about everything that had happened. They did not know about, or the trials, or the war that had almost been. But they would understand. They were human after all. And humans had always made room for one more. She had planted a seed. Whether it would grow or die, she did not know. But it was something. It was a start. He sat down again. The trial was over. But knew this was only the beginning. "I accept." Whatever happened next, she would not let go. She had promised herself that. She had promised the dead mother on the nursery floor. She had promised this tiny life pressed against her heart. She would not let go.